All right, so we're diving deep into the future of ethics.
Ooh, exciting.
It is,
Yeah.
and you've given us some really thought-provoking material
Mhm.
to go over today.
Yeah.
Specifically, Chapter 8,
Okay.
which talks about the future directions of ethics, and I think is particularly interesting because this chapter tackles like the changing landscape of work and our responsibilities in a globalized world.
Absolutely.
So get ready for some aha moments, folks, because this is going
Yeah.
to get into how we navigate choices ahead.
It does. And what I think is really interesting about it is that it doesn't really shy away from those hard questions.
Yeah.
You know, it brings up the fact that the future of work, for example, is going to be very, very different. And we need a
Yeah.
new ethical playbook to deal with it, basically.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little.
Okay.
What exactly is changing about work that requires this new ethical perspective?
Yeah.
The chapter mentions automation, digital labor, remote work. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's not just one thing, right? It's like all these converging trends that are reshaping how we even define work, you know? So like take automation, for instance.
Yeah.
Think about AI. Think about robots that can do a lot of the jobs that humans do right now.
Right.
We're talking potential for job displacement
Whoa, okay.
on a scale we've never really seen before.
So are we all going to be out of jobs? Like, what does this chapter say about
Right.
dealing with that kind of upheaval?
Yeah. You know, it's not about doom and gloom. It's about recognizing that this disruption could happen
Right.
and being prepared for it ethically.
Yeah.
So the chapter really dives into this concept of labor rights in the age of automation.
Okay.
It argues that, you know, our old models of employment and our social safety nets, they might need a rethink.
So things like universal basic income, is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, that's one of the ideas that comes up.
Yep.
UBI is a way to deal with mass job displacement.
The chapter also really emphasizes retraining programs, right? Helping workers adapt to the new skills that they're going to need
Yeah.
in an automated workforce.
That makes sense. It's not just about handouts. It's about
Exactly.
equipping people to succeed in the future.
Yeah, preparing for jobs that might look totally different
Really?
than what we're used to.
And I think the big takeaway there is we can't just sort of like sit back and let this all happen without thinking through the consequences.
Absolutely. We can't ignore the ethical side of it
Right.
for the workers.
Yeah.
You know, the chapter really drives home that point that we have a responsibility to make sure this transition is just,
Yeah.
you know, that we prioritize
Right.
human dignity and well-being, even as technology is changing things so rapidly.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Like be proactive, not reactive to this whole
It's a big
100%.
landscape.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just automation, right? The chapter also looks at the gig economy.
Right. The rise of remote work. You know, how is this all reshaping work-life balance? What about worker rights? What even is employment anymore?
Yeah, let's talk about those.
Okay.
I mean, I work remotely.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's great. But I can definitely see how it can be tough to switch off.
Yes,
You know, the lines get blurry.
totally. And you've hit on a key ethical concern that this chapter brings up. You know, remote work, yes, it's flexible, but it can lead to this always on culture,
Right.
which can really hurt people's mental health and their well-being.
Okay, so then how do we get the benefits of remote work
Yeah.
but protect workers from exploitation or burnout?
Right. That is the question.
Right.
The chapter suggests we need new legal frameworks.
Okay.
We need ethical guidelines that are built for this new reality. You know, our old labor laws, they were designed for a different world.
Right.
They don't really address these unique challenges of remote work.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
need rules that work for the digital age.
Yeah, for how fluid and interconnected work is now.
Right.
And then when it comes to the gig economy, the chapter is worried about the erosion of worker protections.
Yeah.
You know, gig workers, they often don't have benefits, no job security, the right to collective bargaining even.
Right. That's huge.
It is, and it feels like, you know, while the gig economy creates opportunities for some people, it's also creating this whole underclass of workers who are vulnerable to exploitation.
Absolutely.
And the chapter doesn't shy away from that.
Yeah.
You know, it's calling for a reevaluation of how we classify workers
Okay.
and stronger labor laws to make sure those gig workers have the same rights and protections as everybody else.
So basically, this chapter is saying The future of work is full of ethical dilemmas.
Yes.
And we got to be proactive.
We do.
In shaping a future that is technologically advanced.
Absolutely.
But also ethically sound.
Yeah, a great summary. You know, just because we have progress in technology, it doesn't automatically mean ethical progress.
Right.
We have to be intentional and make sure that human values are leading the way.
And speaking of steering things in the right direction, this chapter also gets into our ethical responsibilities in this increasingly globalized world.
It does.
There's a whole
another layer.
Another can of worms, right?
Yeah, but it's all connected.
Yeah.
You know, globalization is one of the drivers of all these shifts in the labor market.
Right.
And as the world gets more interconnected, our ethical responsibilities kind of have to expand beyond our own borders.
So it's not just about what's happening in our own backyard anymore.
Exactly.
We got to think globally.
Yeah, think about the global impact of our actions and choices.
Got it.
The chapter talks about this idea of global citizenship and the ethical obligations that come with it. It's like a challenge to think beyond our immediate communities and to remember we share this planet.
Okay, so what does it actually mean to be a global citizen?
Right.
Does that mean I have to give up my national identity?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing that we're all part of this bigger human family and that what we do can have ripple effects that reach way beyond our own little corner of the world.
So like if I buy a T-shirt that was made in a sweatshop overseas,
right,
I'm implicated, even if it's not happening right in front of me.
That's a perfect example. The chapter argues that global citizenship means being more aware of where our stuff comes from. Yeah. You know, the global supply chains, holding corporations accountable for how they're behaving, and advocating for fairness around the world.
So that feels like a huge responsibility.
It is.
Where do we even begin to tackle something that big?
Yeah, you know, there's no easy checklist, but the chapter really emphasizes education, awareness, and collective action.
Okay.
It's about being informed, you know, supporting organizations that are fighting for social justice, using our voices to push for change.
So it's a mindset shift from me to we.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness.
Okay.
You know, that people all over the world, their well-being is tied to ours.
I got it.
And that brings us to, you know, we talked about automation, the gig economy, remote work, now global citizenship.
Yeah, what else does this chapter cover in terms of ethical responsibilities in this globalized world?
Well, it goes right into one of the most pressing issues of our time, global environmental stewardship.
Okay.
It argues that climate change, it's not just an environmental crisis, it's an ethical challenge.
Yeah, I mean, climate change affects everyone.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that it's an ethical issue, not just...
It's a human issue.
Yeah, a scientific one.
Yeah, and the chapter really challenges us to rethink our relationship with nature.
Right.
To see how interconnected all living things are. Okay.
And to really prioritize sustainability.
So it's not just about individual actions like recycling.
Right.
It's about advocating for bigger changes.
It is. The chapter argues that we have to hold corporations and governments accountable for their impact on the environment, push for policies that promote renewable energy, and invest in green technologies.
Okay, so it's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
It is
individual action, but we also need to look at the systems that cause these problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what else the chapter highlights?
It's that.
Intergenerational justice.
Okay.
We have an ethical obligation to future generations to leave them a planet that's livable.
Wow.
It's not just about us.
Powerful stuff.
It's about making sure there's a good future for the people who come after us.
Okay, so we've talked about automation, gig economy, remote work, global citizenship. Now, what else is in this chapter about ethical responsibilities? Okay, so the chapter also goes into the future of gender and social justice movements.
Ooh, okay, I'm curious about this one.
Yeah.
How does the chapter connect those things to globalization and ethics?
So it argues that globalization has kind of done two things.
Okay.
It's amplified these movements, but it's also made them more complicated.
Okay.
On the one hand, technology and interconnectedness have made it easier for activists to connect, share information, mobilize across borders.
So like social media has become a tool for raising awareness.
Exactly.
Okay.
But on the other hand, globalization has also, led to the spread of some harmful stuff, like trafficking, exploitation, and the erosion of different cultures.
So it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
It can help. It can hurt.
Yeah, and that's the complexity the chapter's trying to grapple with.
Yeah.
We have to be mindful of how globalization is affecting these movements and figure out how to use it for good.
Yeah.
Not for bad.
Got it.
Challenging the ways it's being used to perpetuate injustice,
right.
Really leveraging its potential for positive change.
So how do we actually do that?
Well, the chapter emphasizes solidarity, building coalitions across borders, recognizing that the fight for justice anywhere is connected to the fight for justice everywhere.
It's a global struggle.
It is. For human rights, for dignity.
Got it.
And it's about understanding that real social justice means addressing the root causes of inequality, like poverty, discrimination, lack of access to things like education and healthcare.
So it's a holistic approach to social justice.
Exactly.
You can't separate these issues.
You can't. The future of work, globalization, the environment, social justice, it's all woven together.
Yeah.
And the chapter says navigating these interconnected challenges, you need a strong ethical compass. You need to be willing to have tough conversations, and you got to be committed to working together.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
In this first part of our deep dive. Future of work, global citizenship, environmental stewardship, social justice movements.
It's a lot.
So where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part, let's look at some specific examples of how these ethical principles are actually being put into practice.
Oh, I like that. Give me some concrete examples of how these ideas are playing out.
Yeah, how it's affecting real people. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Cool.
The chapter has some really compelling case studies that illustrate the challenges and the opportunities of this new ethical landscape.
Let's do it.
Okay, so ready for some real-world examples?
Oh, yeah. Hit me with it.
All right, so imagine this. A big clothing brand. They're facing a ton of pressure from people who buy their stuff, from activists to clean up their act when it comes to labor practices. But, they're overseas factories. They're being accused of exploiting workers to keep prices low.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we see those headlines all the time, right?
Yes.
Fast fashion and all the ethical problems that come with it.
And this case study, it really digs into how that company deals with this global responsibility.
Okay.
They have to think about, their shareholders, they want to make money.
Yeah.
But they also have to think about what's right.
Right, ethically.
Making sure workers are treated fairly, making sure the factories are safe.
It's a tough balancing act.
It is. So what do? Do they just go for profits? Right. Well, the case study looks at a few different things they could do.
Okay.
In one scenario, they try to ignore the problem, hoping it'll just disappear.
Right. Sweep it under the rug.
But in today's world, with social media, everybody's connected.
Yeah.
That strategy blows up in their face.
Right.
People know where their stuff comes from.
Yeah. You can't hide anymore.
They demand transparency. Yeah. They want companies to be accountable.
Absolutely. So what happens in the other scenario?
So in another scenario, they actually try to do something. They get proactive. They work with labor rights organizations. They bring in independent people to audit the factories. They try to set standards for the whole industry.
Okay, so they're taking responsibility.
They are.
Trying to be part of the solution.
And the case study points out this kind of ethical leadership, it doesn't just help the workers. It can be good for business, too.
Okay, how so?
Well, people are willing to pay more for stuff they know is made ethically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's an incentive for companies to actually do the right thing.
So it's not always profits versus ethics.
Right. Sometimes doing the right thing is good for the bottom line.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But it's not always easy. The case study says that too.
Okay.
Some investors, they just care about short-term gains. They don't care about long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole challenge of staying ahead of the curve. Supply chains change.
Right.
New ethical dilemmas pop up.
So it's an ongoing process.
It is. It's not a one-time fix.
Yeah. You got to be constantly paying attention.
Vigilance, adaptability, and a willingness to really talk to people all over the world.
Okay, let's switch gears a little.
Okay.
What happens when technology creates new kinds of inequality?
Ooh, good question. So let's think about AI artificial intelligence being used in hiring.
Okay.
Imagine a company, they only use algorithms to look at resumes and choose who to interview.
So that sounds efficient.
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Maybe more objective.
But here's where the ethical dilemma comes in.
Okay.
What if those algorithms are trained on data that has biases built in?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if the data shows that historically men have been hired more for certain jobs, then the algorithm might just learn to favor men.
Even if they're not the best candidate.
Yeah, even if they're not more qualified.
And it's not just gender. It could be racial bias, ageism, any kind of discrimination that's in that data.
Right.
The algorithm, it just follows the patterns blindly.
So it's perpetuating the problem.
It can even make it worse.
Wow. So this seemingly neutral tool, it's actually making things more unfair.
That's the danger.
Okay, so how do we fix that?
Well, the chapter talks about something called algorithmic accountability.
Okay.
It means making sure the people who build and use these technologies, they're aware of the potential for bias.
Okay.
And they take steps to stop it.
So it's not just about the code.
Right. It's about ethics at every step.
Got it.
It also means we need ways to check these algorithms, test them for bias, and make changes if we need to.
Constant monitoring.
Yeah, we can't just assume the computer's going to be fair.
Right, just because it's a program.
It's like any powerful tool.
Yeah.
It can be used for good or for bad.
Right. It depends on the people using it.
Exactly. So as AI gets more powerful, this algorithmic accountability, it's going to be crucial.
To make sure it's helping us.
Yeah.
Not hurting us.
Okay, ready for another case study?
Oh, yeah. Lay it on me.
This one looks at climate change and what we owe to future generations.
All right. This is a big one.
It is. So imagine this, a community on the coast. Sea levels are rising.
Right.
They have to make a choice.
Okay.
Do they spend a ton of money on infrastructure, try to protect their homes and businesses, knowing it might not even work in the long run?
Right.
Or do they move?
Wow.
Leave their land, their lives behind?
That's a tough choice.
It is. And the case study says there are no easy answers here.
Yeah.
You've got people's desire to stay where they are. You've got the cost of moving.
Right.
And the question of whether you can even live on the coast anymore.
Yeah, with the climate change.
Climate change is a real human issue.
It is. It's affecting people's lives right now.
And the case study also asks, what about governments?
Yeah.
What about corporations? What's their responsibility?
Right.
Should they be held accountable for the damage that's already been done? What do they owe to the communities that are being hurt by climate change?
Right. We can't just put it all on individuals.
We can't.
It's a bigger problem than that.
Exactly. So the chapter argues for this kind of multifaceted approach.
Okay.
Individual responsibility, systemic change.
Right.
We need to change how we use energy.
Yeah.
We need to invest in renewable energy. And we need policies that focus on sustainability and environmental justice.
So it's a collective problem.
It is.
It needs collective solutions.
We got to work together across borders, governments, corporations, everyday people,
all working together
toward a sustainable future.
These case studies are really interesting. They're taking these abstract ethical principles and showing how they affect people.
It's about making it real.
Yeah, real world stuff.
It's not just theories.
Okay, so this chapter also talks about gender and social justice movements.
Right.
Do we have any case studies about that?
We do. There's one that really stuck with me.
Okay.
It's about the tech industry. And the challenges they face with diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about the lack of diversity in tech.
It's a big problem, and this case study jumps right into it.
Okay.
It follows this tech startup. They're having trouble attracting diverse talent. They know it's an issue.
Right.
But they don't know what to do about it.
It's like they're trying to fix a leaky pipeline.
That's a great way to put it.
But they don't know where to start.
And the case study looks at all the different things that contribute to this problem.
Okay.
Unconscious bias, lack of mentorship,
right,
lack of support for people from underrepresented groups.
So it's not just about hiring more diverse people.
No, it's about creating a culture where everyone feels welcome, respected, supported.
Got it. So how do they do that?
Well, the case study says tech companies have an ethical obligation to deal with this.
Okay.
It's not just about doing the right thing. It's also good for business.
Okay, I'm listening.
Diversity and inclusion, they're essential for innovation.
Right. If everyone thinks the same,
Yeah.
You're going to miss out on good ideas.
Exactly. A diverse workforce brings different experiences, different skills,
Makes sense.
different perspectives,
Yeah.
and that leads to better products.
So it's a win-win.
It is. Doing the right thing is good for business.
Yeah.
And the case study, it actually gives some ideas for how tech companies can create a more inclusive environment.
Okay, like what?
Things like blind resume reviews, setting diversity goals,
Okay.
investing in mentorship programs.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach.
It is, like we talked about with climate change.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time fix. It's about changing the whole system
Making it more equitable.
and realizing it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, you can't just check a box and say you're done.
Exactly.
These case studies have been really eye-opening.
Yeah.
They've shown how these big ethical ideas actually play out.
It's about connecting the dots.
Yeah, it's not just theory.
It's about real people's lives.
And it's encouraging to see that there are people and organizations out there who are trying to do the right thing.
It gives me hope
Yeah, me too.
that we can actually navigate these tough ethical waters.
Okay, so now are you ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk about how to anticipate and adapt to these ethical challenges that are coming.
Bring on the future. So we've talked about all these real-world ethical issues,
Yeah, we've seen how complex it can get.
but how do we get ready for what's next?
Right. How do we prepare for the ethical curveballs the future is going to throw at us?
Exactly. What does the chapter say about that?
Well, it doesn't have all the answers, but it does point out some key areas where we need to start thinking ethically now.
Okay, so it's like preventative ethics.
Yeah, I like that. Preventative ethics.
So what areas should we be focusing on?
One that really stands out is technology and human augmentation.
Okay, what's that?
Things like brain-computer interfaces,
Oh,
genetic editing, even designer babies.
okay, that's getting into some sci-fi territory.
It is, and the possibilities are incredible.
Yeah.
But they also raise a lot of ethical questions.
So we're talking about hacking our own evolution.
In a way.
And where do ethics come in?
The chapter says, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should.
Right.
We have to think about the consequences,
Yeah.
the intended ones, the unintended ones.
Before we mess with what it means to be human.
Exactly. We need some serious ethical guidelines.
Okay, how do we get those?
Well, the chapter says we need to have a big public conversation about these technologies before they become commonplace.
So, like, what are the benefits?
Yeah, what are the risks?
Who gets access to them?
Right, and how do we make sure they don't make existing inequalities worse?
It's like we need an ethical roadmap for the future.
I like that, an ethical roadmap.
Yeah.
The chapter also talks about something called moral imagination.
Moral imagination, what's that?
It means being able to imagine different futures
Okay.
and thinking through the ethical implications of each one.
So we need to stretch our brains a bit.
We do. We need to be able to grapple with possibilities that seem crazy now.
Right, like science fiction?
But could be reality tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
I like that.
Another big area the chapter talks about is our increasingly interconnected world.
Okay, so the digital realm,
Yeah, data, information, all that stuff.
big data, privacy, all that.
Exactly. We're already worried about data privacy and security,
Yeah.
but it's only going to get more complicated.
How so?
Imagine a future where our thoughts, our emotions, even our memories
Whoa.
are all digital and potentially accessible by others.
That's kind of creepy.
It is, and the chapter says we need strong data privacy protections.
Okay.
People should own their data, control their data.
Right.
Companies need to be upfront about what they're doing with it.
So it's like informed consent, but on a bigger scale.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting our personal info.
Okay.
It's about making sure data isn't misused.
Like for manipulation.
Yeah, manipulation, discrimination, surveillance.
Right. We've already seen how algorithms can be used to spread misinformation.
And it could get worse.
It's kind of scary.
It is. So we need ethical guidelines, regulations for how data is used.
Okay. Especially as AI gets smarter.
Yes, and more powerful.
It feels like we're always playing catch up.
It does sometimes.
Technology changes so fast.
But the chapter says we can do this. We can. Humans are moral beings.
Okay.
We can adapt. We can evolve our ethical thinking.
So it's not all doom and gloom?
No, it's a call to action.
Okay.
We have to have these conversations, challenge the status quo,
Right.
work together to make sure technology serves us.
I like that. It's not about fearing the future. It's about shaping it.
Exactly. We have a say in how this all unfolds.
Well, this has been amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gone from overwhelmed to optimistic.
I'm glad to hear that.
We can build a better future.
We can.
But it takes all of us.
It does. So keep asking those tough questions. Challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
And use your voice to create a future that aligns with your values.
That's a great way to end this.
It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for guiding us through this deep dive.
You're welcome.
It's been really thought-provoking.
I'm glad.
And I'm feeling hopeful about the future.
Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create.